Good evening and welcome. I'm Andrea Mulrine. I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Lackawanna County, and I'd like to welcome you tonight to our first debate of the evening for the candidates with the Democratic candidates with the 112th Legislative District for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I'd like to extend my thanks to the University of Scranton for allowing us the use of this facility, and also to the College Democrats who pitch in and help us out throughout the year, and to our friends at ECTV who will be taping this evening to make the debate available on ECTV, and then it will also be posted later this week on the League's website, which you can find at lwvlackawanna.org. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that encourages the informed and active participation in government and influences public policy through education and advocacy. We neither support nor oppose any political party or candidate. We ask you to join the League and to help us with these types of events if you're so inclined. And if you feel that membership is not for you, we ask that you consider a financial contribution on your way out the door to help us support these types of events throughout the year. This, of course, is a primary election in Pennsylvania, and while many times the primary elections are overlooked, in also many instances the primaries are where the decisions are actually made, and that is true for this year as well as for many other years. So, of course, we have the presidential election this year, and even though Rick Santorum has suspended his campaign, his name will be available on the Pennsylvania ballot. For United States Senator, we have two candidates on the Democratic ticket, Bob Casey Jr. and Joseph Vodvarka. For the same race, and we have 5 candidates on the Republican ticket, Dave Christian, Mark Scaringi, Stephen Welsh, Tom Smith, and Sam Rohrer. For Attorney General, there is a race on the Democratic ticket, Kathleen Kane and Patrick Murphy. David Freed is running unopposed on the Republican ticket. For Auditor General, there is a race on the Republican ticket, Frank Pinto and John Maher, and Jean D. Pasquale is running unopposed on the Democratic ticket. For the State Treasurer, there will be a race in the fall. Diana Vaughn versus Bob McCord. Diana is the Republican and Bob McCord is the Democratic candidate on those races. So those are the ones that are available statewide. I have to say that I did search for debates among some of these candidates and was unable to find them either on PCN or on WVIA. So I would suggest that for additional information, you go to the Times Tribune or to the League's electronic sites on Smart Voter and on vote411.org. Locally, we've had a lot of change this year in our congressional districts, our U.S. congressional districts. So whereas in the past we had, in the city of Scranton, had been covered by the 11th congressional district, that is no longer true. Lackawanna County is now covered still by the 10th partially, and there is no race in the primary for that seat. Tom Marino, the incumbent on the Republican ticket, will face Philip Scolo on the Democratic ticket in the fall. For the 17th congressional district, which is now the district that will be representing the city of Scranton, on the Democratic ticket, Matt Cartwright and Tim Holden will face each other in the primary, and Lorene Cummings is running unopposed for the Republican seat in the primary. And I have to say that, again, we actually did try to schedule a debate between Tim Holden and Matt Cartwright, and were unsuccessful in working through scheduling. So there is no debate available for them. And again, I would point you to those same resources to find additional information on those candidates as well. Tonight, as I said, we'll be debating with the candidates for the 112th Legislative District. And our candidates this evening are Ken Smith and Kevin Haggerty. Ken, of course, is the incumbent. Kevin is the Democratic challenger. There will be no opening statements from the candidates this evening. The rationale for the questions: the League of Women Voters believes that democratic government depends upon the informed and active participation of its citizens. Democratic government requires that governmental bodies protect the citizens' right to know by giving adequate notice of proposed actions, holding open meetings, and making public records accessible. In addition, we believe that responsible government should be responsive to the will of the people. It requires integrity and accountability, and we use these guidelines as we're drafting the questions for tonight's debate. This will be an approximately 60-minute debate. All candidates will answer the same set of questions, and no questions were given in advance. The candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to each question, And the first candidate to answer a question may have up to 1 minute for a rebuttal at their choosing. And the first candidate to answer the first question will be Ken Smith. Candidates will be allowed a 2-minute closing statement, and I would ask that you hold your applause for any of your candidates in the interest of time so that we can squeeze in as much of the questioning as we possibly can. So with that, the first question of the evening goes to Ken Smith. Ken, what do you bring to the table that your opponent doesn't? Why are you the best candidate?
Thank you, Andrea. And let me start by saying I want to thank the League of Women Voters and the University of Scranton for hosting this evening. Right off the bat, experience. When Ed Stayback retires at the end of this legislative session, I will become the most senior representative in Lackawanna County. I will be coming into my 4th term, and during these days of scarce resources, I think that's a big plus where I'm able to go and find the resources and know where to turn, where to get the answers, and how to properly represent the people. My entire life, all I've done is get up early, work hard, do my job, and experience counts, and knowing the process, the inner workings of the inner workings of the legislature, I think is very important as well. So understanding the process, the legislative process, and experience.
Thank you. Kevin, the question to you, what makes you the best candidate? What do you bring to the table that your opponent does not?
Andrea, I'd also like to thank the League of Women Voters for having this debate. This is the only time that we get to stand here and give people an informed choice to who they want to be their next state representative. What separates me is the truth. Mr. Smith has talked about his 5.5 years and being the senior-most state representative, but it's not where we get in life, it's how we get there. And every single day of his time in office, he has lied on his ethics statement. He has failed to disclose loans and bills and taxes, and we don't have a government without taxes. We would have anarchy without tax-paying people. My hard work and resilience has been seen across this district. My entire life, I have done social justice work. I have never made a lot of money. The people know my concerns are for their families. I've met them at their doorsteps and in their living rooms, and I am so proud to be here tonight to become the next state representative.
Thank you. The next question. Yes, go
Can I
on.
have a rebuttal?
Okay.
Andrea, is that how it works?
You can tell me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
1 minute.
In my rebuttal, I'm not sure if my opponent wants to go there. If we want to get personal, then I'll get personal. And I'm going to refrain from going there now. If we want to get into his history, we can do that. But I don't think he wants that to happen. As far as I'm concerned, I've been a small business owner my entire life. I'm sorry that I overinvested in my business. I've had some bad experiences with a murder in my parking lot, a shooting in my parking lot, muggings in my parking lot, and a brick thrown through a car windshield. I mean, along with the bad economy. I put good money in the bad. I tried to serve the people. It was a family business for 76 years, and you want to attack me on that? You know, sometimes bad things happen to good people, and I'm sorry that had to happen. But it's like having a family. It's like having a family member on life support. At what point do you pull the plug? You want to attack me on that? Go right ahead.
Andrea, I get a 1 minute as well.
Okay.
And I'm certainly not attacking Representative Smith on his business. This has absolutely nothing to do with his business. He took out unsecured personal loans, owes more than $138,000, and he just did not disclose those on his state ethics form. He lied about the money, and I'm here tonight to ask, is he using that money against me right now? And what did he use the money for?
Okay, we're going to move on now to the next question, and if you'd like to address that, you can do it in your closing statement then. The first question that I have pertaining to voter ID. So, as you know, recently Pennsylvania passed a law requiring voters to show photo ID in order to vote. If you support this law, what are the facts and evidence pertaining to voter fraud that supports your decision? If you are opposed to the new law, please explain how you believe it will disenfranchise voters. Kevin, you respond first.
For a long time, the Republicans have tried to disenfranchise voters, and I think Mr. Smith and I will both agree on that. They want the numbers to be low. They don't want the voice of the people to shine out. And now to go to people who don't even have driver's license, who don't have the ability to have a picture ID, they're already intimidated enough to go to the voting booth. Going to the voting booth is not as easy as some people think, and we should be encouraging people. People actually get taken off the voting rolls if they don't vote after a certain amount of years. In America, if you want to vote, you go to vote, no matter how many times you decide to or not, how many documents you need to produce. If you're a citizen of this country and you're registered to vote, let the people's voice be heard, and I'm against any type of legislation like this.
Ken, the same question to you.
I am absolutely positively opposed to this bill that was signed into law by our governor, voter ID. It is a national national agenda of the Republican Party to suppress the minority vote and the vote of our seniors. I just signed on this week onto a bill that will repeal the voter ID that was just signed into law. And I am sure, well, this is going, this bill is already being pressed, or I'm sorry, is being used. This bill is now in front of the appellate court as being unconstitutional. So I'm sure through the vetting process that it will be declared unconstitutional. In the meantime, I signed on to a bill that will repeal that. And remember, this ID bill will cost the state $11 million to institute, $11 million to bring this up to speed. In a time when we're cutting Meals on Wheels to our seniors, I don't think that we should be suppressing the vote and spending $11 million.
Thank you. Ken, I want to continue along the idea of election reform. My next question is, would you introduce and/or support legislation to allow no-fault absentee voting and to ease the deadlines for returning absentee ballots?
I absolutely support no-fault absentee ballots. There's no question about that. With the absentee ballots, right now you have to either be out of the county or you have to be homebound. And I think if we did a no fault, then it would certainly open it up to more population for people to vote. Is there a second part of that question?
The two parts of the question were about no fault absentee voting and then also easing the deadlines for returning absentee ballots.
Right. I think they could loosen that up as well to bring it closer to the voting date.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, the same question to you, please.
I pretty much agree with Representative Smith. Let's make voting as easy as possible. Let's think about the people who don't have the ability to get to the ballot, to get to the election polls. People want to cast their vote. They want to participate. It's very simple. Let's allow them to do it under the easiest standards.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, you'll answer this next question first. I'm going to move on to the topic of ethics. Given the recent charges and convictions of corruption performed by current or former State House or Senate members Purcell, Ori, Deweese, Fumo, Vian, and Mello, what suggestions do you have to improve the ethics oversight of members of the General Assembly? So please be as specific as you can. We're looking for ways to improve the oversight.
Andre, I think we need to tell the truth during the process of running for office. We have an ethics commission. We have ethics statements. The people who are lying on these ethics statements to get elected, people who are not disclosing loans to get elected, the people who are winning elections by doing the wrong thing, that's how we get better people in office. It's not when we get there, it's how we get there.
Ken, the same question to you.
Well, I just think that through the Ethics Commission and open records are important. You know, even 6, 8, 10 years ago, open records was hardly even spoken of. And today, there's people are encouraged. It makes it makes it a lot easier to get the information, whether it be online or make the request. Make the request to your government, whether it be state, local, or federal. So open records, certainly, and I believe at the end of the day that the more light you shine on government, the less corruption you're going to have, and the stronger government we will be part of.
Okay.
Andrea, could I have a 1-minute rebuttal,
Okay.
please? When Mr. Smith is talking about open records, he had that opportunity in the state of Pennsylvania to have an open record, to show his record, to produce documents. That's what they asked him to do. That's the law. Representative Smith is a lawmaker who decided not to do that. If I lose $20, I'm searched into my house for that $20. He had $138,000 that he'd said nothing about. Open records, Mr. Smith, open records are openness of the individual.
Do I have rebuttal?
You do? Mhm.
I'd like to know where the $138,000 is, because if I
So
had
would we,
it,
Mr. Smith.
it would make it a lot easier for me to just to live. Look, I put everything I own and then some into my business. I forgot one corporate loan, which you talk about personal loan. If you know anything about business, it's a business loan, but you also have to have a personal guarantee. And so, although the business didn't pan out the way I wanted to, then I am responsible for that. Something that I'll have debt the rest of my life. I understand that. I don't walk away from my commitments, but I certainly didn't try to hide anything. It was one oversight.
Ken, you're going to respond first to the next question. This one actually has an introduction first, and then I'll ask the question, okay? So here's the introduction. The State Integrity Investigation, a project of the Center for Public Integrity, Global Integrity, and Public Radio International, recently released its state-by-state report card based on analysis of each state's laws and practices that deter corruption and promote accountability and openness. Pennsylvania ranked 18th overall with a grade of C-. So that's setting the stage for where this question is coming from, okay? So now this question in particular pertains to judicial accountability. Pennsylvania received an F for judicial accountability, with particularly low scores for regulations governing conflicts of interest and disclosure of assets of state-level judges. Please explain why you agree or disagree with the grade, and if you agree with the grade, what actions can you take as a legislator to address this?
Well, Pennsylvania, I believe you said got a C- if I remember.
Overall, for all that,
Right.
18 categories.
And I don't think any state received an A, am I right?
No state received an A.
And very few a B.
Yeah, it wasn't
Right,
too,
so
wasn't
we
too good.
ended up 18th. And once again, I think with open records, that helps. Judicial oversight, what can we do as the legislature? Certainly, we can adapt bills and laws to bring more accountability on behalf of the judicial system. But once again, open records, oversight, sunshine onto the entire process, including the judicial system.
Okay. Kevin, the question to you specifically about judicial accountability and what you would do as a legislator.
I think the first thing we need to do in judicial accountability and judicial races is to take money out of the campaigns. When judges are raising money from attorneys who appear in front of them, bad things happen. Bad things did happen in Luzerne County. Very bad things. I was an inner city teacher. I worked with court-adjudicated children, children that I fell in love with, children that have problems. And their last resort is us, our government. That's their very last resort. And what took place in this area is not an F, it's an F-. It is the largest disgrace I've ever read about in Northeast Pennsylvania. We need to have leaders who will stand up to these men, no matter how powerful they are. To stand up because you believe in something, no matter how scared you are, because I can promise you the children are more scared. Stand up because it's right. That's what I'll do.
Thank you. Kevin, you're going to answer this next question first. I want to stay on the idea of how we select our judges. Do you support changing Pennsylvania's method for selecting judges by election to merit selection? Why or why not?
I don't. I believe the people should be picking their judges. There would be more corruption if there was a select few of the wealthy and influential people telling us who's going to lead our judicial branch. I do, however, want to reiterate, we need to take the money out of judicial races. Do you want to get quality judges in this area? Take the money out.
Ken, the question to you, do you support merit selection? Why or why not?
No, I think the people should pick their judges. You know, one approach you could take is to have kind of a partnership where the voters can designate whether they want to give a dollar, let's say when they get their license or registration, if they want to give $1 to a judicial campaign fund for Pennsylvania, then they could divvy up that money and use that money for judicial races. That way you're taking the private or the special interest money out of it. But I truly believe that the people should pick their judges.
Okay, thank you. I'm still on the report card from the state of Pennsylvania pertaining to this question, and Ken, you'll respond to this question first. This one pertains to political financing. So Pennsylvania also received an F for political financing on our report card, including a 0 in the category pertaining to citizen access to records for financing political parties, and very, very low scores for the effectiveness of current regulations for both individual and political party financing. So we're talking about an F in the category of political financing. Do you agree or disagree with the grade? And if you agree with the grade, what actions, again, would you take as a legislator to deal with that particular issue?
Well, I guess I'll agree with the grade, and I certainly believe that we do need reform. And I think the best way to do that would be to look at the federal level, what they do. It's on the federal level, it's $2,500 per election per candidate. It's $5,000 per campaign per candidate for PACs. All right, and that way it will limit the dollars and the special interest dollars on the state level. I mean, right now there's no regulations as to who and how much can be given to a campaign, and therefore I think an F is certainly the proper grade. Do the federal level and a campaign finance report, and what our United States Supreme Court did with the super PACs, I think, is unconscionable, which it brings certainly a lot of special interest money into the fold. I don't agree with that, but if we would follow the example of the federal campaign finance reform, I think that'll certainly bring us a long way in Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Kevin, the question to you.
Well, Andrea, speaking about what we're going to do and actually doing it are two different things. And Representative Smith took large amounts of money from the legislators in Pennsylvania. Representative Bill Keller, who was under investigation by the FBI and IRS, gave him $6,000. A dozen other legislators gave large contributions. As candidates, we sit back here and we raise money from everyday people, what we can, and we try to do our best and we try to tell our story. Representative Smith said in the beginning he doesn't want to get into this. He doesn't want to attack me, but he took that money last time and he attacked me, and he did it blindly when I wasn't there through direct mail pieces full of lies, and he wouldn't do it now when I'm sitting here. He took that money, he attacked me, and he's talking now about openness and how to change it. You have the opportunity to change it, and you took the money.
Ken, do you want to rebut?
Yeah, you know, as far as taking large sums of money, these are my peers. These are the people that I work with. These are the people that are saying, we believe in you, and we trust you as a legislator. we have a great, not only a trust, but we think a lot of you as a legislator. And actually, Bill Keller's one of my roommates, so he's one of the closest people to me. But taking large sums of money, look at my campaign finance report. I don't have any money. Whatever money comes in, I use. I use for a campaign. That is it. I'm not somebody that carries a large balance or anything like that. That's not what I do. That's it.
Andre, could I have a
Okay.
rebuttal? And I'd like to know how all of the things during these campaign are paid for. When you say you don't have a lot of money, you do have radio shows. You were on air today on the radio. You have billboards that you lied on. And I brought that to your attention in Moscow about a month and a half ago, and you agreed that it was a lie. And you continue to keep it up. Mr. Smith, this entire 5.5 years has been one great big lie. I have to ask this question, that $138,000, excuse me, $138,000 that you took out, did not repay and did not disclose. Are you using that money against me in this campaign? Because you're doing quite a bit of advertising.
We're going to move,
what-
we're going to move on
what are you
to the
doing?
budget question. We're going to move on to the budget question. That's the next question in the,
Andre, I warned you last time it happened, and now it's happening again.
I'm not
Ken,
asking
don't
those
warn her too,
questions.
please. You warned enough people.
We're going to stick to the topic. We're going to stick to the issues, because that's what we're here to hear about tonight, is what the issues are. The next question pertains to the budget, and Kevin, you'll respond first. What are your budget priorities? Please be specific with any cuts or increases you propose, and please avoid the generic wasteful spending category.
Andre, I believe that we need to immediately tax natural gas in this state of Pennsylvania. This is the greatest revenue that we ever had before, and we're not doing it. And the legislators have had time to do it, and the pressure is not there. There have been cuts to education that are so critical. I was born and raised in a middle-class family, and I went to Dunmore High School, Dunmore School District, from kindergarten through 12th grade. We couldn't go to private school. We went to public school, and we were proud of it. And that gave me the opportunity then to go to Villanova University, and I competed with all the private school kids. Public school cuts are no longer accepted, and I'm offended by any legislature who votes for taking voucher money out of the public schools. I believe the cuts to human services are a disgrace. Our weak and our tired and our poor, that's who we asked to come to this country. Well, they came, and now we're turning our backs on them. People who have handicaps, people who are widows, and I've met them. I've walked this district. I've met them all. I've held their hand. I've walked into their living rooms. They told me their story. I can't turn my back on them. We're cutting the wrong things. We're taxing the wrong people, and it needs to end.
Ken, the budget question to you, what are your budget priorities? And be specific with any cuts or increases you propose, avoiding the generic wasteful spending category.
Well, let me just say this. The budget cuts and budget priorities. My budget priorities are the committees that I sit on. I sit on the Education Committee. I'm the subcommittee chairman for special education. I sit on the Human Services Committee. I sit on the Aging Committee, and I'm the subcommittee chairman on aging, and I'm on the Health Committee as well. And it's funny, that's where I put my priorities. How do we cut $900 million out of basic education? And an additional, at the same time, we flat funded special education. That is an insult. Human services is a basic need to our society, and we need to set our priorities for human services. For example, education, cut $900 million, plus the federal government cut another $600 million. Let's take our 1.5% impact fee on Marcellus Shale and turn it into 6.5%. That'll bring our funding to where we need with respect to education. Human services, let's cut the fastest growing percentage of our budget, which is corrections. let's cut corrections and put it into human services, because they're directly related. Also, we just saw over $90 million in additional revenue to the state, about $95 million. Let's take those dollars and put it into human services. And that'll take care of those in the twilight of life and those in the shadows of life. There's two examples.
Andrea,
Okay.
could I have a rebuttal, please?
Yes.
Andrea, the cuts to education, and Mr. Smith talked about how do they do this? How do they cut $900 billion from education? My wife is a teacher. My father was a teacher. My sister was a teacher. These are such critical days for young people, the most influential days of your life. And we can't afford to cut anything from our public education. And Representative Smith voted for House Bill 1330, which is an EITC tax credit that takes public funding that we desperately need, and it takes it away from our schools. And I wrote a letter to discuss this, and Representative Smith doesn't respond. He calls down to his friends in Philadelphia to respond in our local newspaper. And right now, I'd like to ask him, why he voted for this. I would never vote for any funding taken away from public education.
Ken, do you have a rebuttal?
I do. House Bill 1330 is the EITC. All right, do you know what the EITC is?
I just said it, Mr. Smith.
What does it stand for?
It's a tax credit, Mr. Smith.
It's the Educational Improvement Tax Credit. It is a public-private partnership. It doesn't take any dollars away from public education. And yes, the gentleman to which you referred to from Philadelphia is the Democratic chairman of the Education Committee. And when he read your letter to the editor, he couldn't believe how distorted it was. These are good dollars. This is corporate dollars being put into the fund so that those that are in special needs schools or in private schools can get the funding that they need. It was $75 million a year ago. This year it's $100 million, and I want to bring it to $150 million.
Thank you. We're going to move on now. The next question, Ken, you'll answer first, and it pertains to the legislative surplus. The state legislature has not yet released the annual financial audit for fiscal year 2011. However, as of 2010, excuse me, there was a $189 million surplus that has been accumulating since at least the early 1980s because the legislature often budgeted more taxpayer money than it needed or spent. What is your reaction to the lack of disclosure and the process that allows a surplus of this size to grow when other programs and initiatives are being cut?
Myself, Andrew?
Yes.
You're right. It's approximately $200 million. Now, constitutionally, you have to have a certain number or a certain percentage of dollars in that surplus, in the caucus surplus. Now, personally, I think that $200 million, when we're making cuts to senior citizens, into human services and education, is far too much. As a matter of fact, I co-sponsored a bill that would certainly put a percentage. It would put a percentage as to where the budget is and how much extra revenue you're allowed to have. So maybe each caucus could only have, let's say, $20 million versus $50 million, and put a cap on it. If constitutionally we have to have X amount of dollars, put a cap on it and make sure it doesn't go over that, and everyone understands the process and shine light on that process.
Thank you. Kevin, the question to you.
Andrea, and Representative Smith has greatly benefited from this surplus with walking around money for the first 5.5 years in office. Some of that has changed recently, but you really, Mr. Smith, you're a piece of work. You've taken this money and run around during elections and giving it to all different people and causes, and now you're here to say that we need to end this, but you didn't end it at the time. And when I walk around this district and I talk to so many people and the senior citizens, property tax relief in Pennsylvania. With the creation of gaming, we got this new idea we're going to give seniors property tax relief. And the forms come to their homes, and they have absolutely no idea how to fill them out, and they throw them away. And where does that money go? That's theirs. It goes back to the general fund in Harrisburg. Who's stopping that? What have you said about that, Mr. Smith?
We can move on, or you can rebut your choice.
Well, I could tell you that senior citizens comes into our office every single day. We do literally hundreds and hundreds of Homestead Act and property tax reliefs serving our seniors every single day. And as far as walking around money that hasn't existed in the past 3 years, look, when there was surpluses, as far as I'm concerned, my job is to bring funding to the district and to fight for every dollar in the district, because if it doesn't come to Northeast Pennsylvania, or if it doesn't come to the 112, it's going somewhere else. I'm not turning a blind eye on that. I'm going to bring it home, and I'm going to give those dollars to our people that need it.
Okay, we'll move on. The next question pertains to jobs. Excuse me. The 8.9% unemployment rate in the Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, Hazleton metropolitan area is the highest of any metropolitan area in the state and above both the national and state rates. We continue to see business closings and even a layoff at Tobyhanna Army Depot. What immediate actions can and will you, as a state legislator, take that will impact unemployment in our region? And Kevin, you'll answer first.
Andrea, we have one of the most successful regional university systems in Pennsylvania. From Bucknell University all the way back here to the University of Scranton, we have 16 regional colleges with the brightest minds from all over the world. And we lose these young men and women faster than any place in Pennsylvania. The brain drain of Northeast Pennsylvania is why we have no economy here. We could utilize these young men and women while they're in school. Get them internships, get them involved in businesses. The technology that they know could generate successful businesses, more mass production, more jobs, and we refuse to identify why we're not doing that. The natural gas, let's call it what it is. This could be the largest boom in the history of Pennsylvania. We could have more construction and roads and bridges, and the natural gas industry is dropping the ball, and our legislatures are not putting the pressure on to create real jobs, Pennsylvania jobs.
Ken, the question to you.
Very simply, House Bill 1966, to which I'm the prime sponsor of. It is a manufacturing bill that relates to the Marcellus Shale area. What this does is, if you are a manufacturer and you manufacture items that are used in the Marcellus Shale industry, for example, the piping, the steel piping, the copper tubing, the vehicles, gas-powered vehicles, whatever it may be. And let's say you invest, pick a number, $100,000 into your company, all right? Then you would get a 20%, tax credit in that fiscal year right off the top. So you would get, if it was $100,000, you'd get $20,000 right off the top, all right? What that does is, it's an incentive for manufacturers to grow their business and create jobs. I'm also part of, through the Democratic caucus, Jumpstart PA, which is a Democratic approach. For example, veterans coming home from the war. If you hire a veteran, you get a $4,000 tax credit for hiring that veteran. That hiring those veterans, we think, would bring about 12,000 jobs. Worker reentry, if you hire a worker that was laid off, it's a $4,000 tax credit. That would produce about 25,000 jobs. Recent graduate from college, you talk about brain drain. Hiring a college graduate that just graduated in the last year or two, you would get a $4,000 tax credit. That's about 12,000 jobs, we predict. And then a job training tax credit. For every person that you hire, for every worker that you hire, you would get a $1,000 tax credit. So that is inducing jobs, job creation.
Okay.
Andre, could I have a rebuttal?
Yes.
And I'd like to talk a little bit about the Marcellus tax. In your commercial today, Mr. Smith, and I heard it on the radio, you said it's time that the natural gas pays their fair share. And I think it goes right back to the credibility issue. How are the natural gas industry and the lobbyists and the legislatures supposed to listen to somebody who's never paid his fair share? How are they supposed to listen to you and take you serious in letting them now pay their fair share when you've never paid your fair share to this community?
How have I not paid my fair share? That's my question. What do you mean? I don't understand. What have I not paid?
Ken, this is, if you want to open, you're asking the question, not me. So if you want him to respond, I'll allow him to respond.
Once again, he wants to come back to my business. He doesn't want to go there.
Andre, I am not talking about the business, and I don't need to repeat that one more time. As recent as yesterday, Mr. Smith has been in the paper for not paying almost $25,000 of state taxes. What I'm referring to is your failure to pay taxes. If everybody in this community acted like you, we would have anarchy in the streets, not a government.
Ken, I'll give you 1 minute to respond to that, and then we're going to move on to the next question.
That relates directly to the business. It's a bad economy, and you know what? You never created a job. You never had to meet a payroll. You don't know. Look, you had a job with the Auditor General. Fired. You had a job with UNC. Fired. You had a job with Lafayette Junior College.
It's an outright lie.
I'm sorry.
How did your job go with that one account?
It's an outright lie. It's an outright lie. Like his billboards and like everything else.
The rules here are
Let him lie?
that you don't speak when your opponent is speaking. That's your opinion. You have your time to speak. Your opponent gets his time to speak. You do not interrupt when your opponent is speaking. And you can address that in your closing statement as well. I want to move on to the next question. I've been involved in the League of Women Voters for quite a long time now, and when I go back through my notes from debate to debate over the years, there are some questions that I ask at every single debate, and unfortunately, this is one of those questions. Although your district only covers part of Scranton, it is an important part, or Scranton is an important part of your district. Scranton has been designated a distressed city under Pennsylvania's Act 47 since 1992, and we seem to be facing exactly the same challenges now as we did 20 years ago. The recent Supreme Court decision supporting awards to Scranton's firefighters further complicates the matter. What is wrong with Act 47, if anything? And should there be a defined time frame for this designation? And can you respond first to this?
Absolutely. Act 47, you have to have a sunset clause. Therein lies the problem. There's no sunset clause. It just continues to go on. Sunset clause would certainly help. And if the sunset is, let's say, 4 years, every single year, there needs to be an accountability report as to the progress that's being made.
Kevin, your response to
Andre, the accountability of Scranton, much like the state of Pennsylvania, is also a C-. And it's so important, so critically important to our community to take care of our neighborhoods, to have first responders, to have firefighters with family-sustaining jobs, and policemen, and safe streets. And to think that Act 47 would cut that out is not what this area represents. We are an area of tradition. We are an area of middle-class workers. And I believe I am fully not in support of it.
Okay. Kevin, you'll respond first to the next question, and I want to move on to the environment. And you've brought up both of you have brought up some of this. Excuse me. Given the opportunities and dangers inherent in gas drilling for Marcellus Shale, what legislation needs to be passed to provide maximum protection to the environment and public health while capitalizing on the economic potential of this natural resource? And I know that you've both been talking about a severance tax and about that, but I'm really interested in legislation that would impact the environment specifically. So that's kind of where I want you to go on this one. And Kevin, you respond to this question first.
Andre, it started immediately with the election of Governor Corbett, who cut in half the Department of Environmental Protection. That was done intentionally. They are the standard. The Department of Energy or Environmental Protection is what protects our land. It's what keeps our environment safe. That was cut, and it's a disgrace.
Ken, your response to that question?
Well, I agree. Look, If we don't have the proper oversight on Marcellus Shale, which could be the greatest thing that ever happened to Pennsylvania, if we don't have the proper oversight, then we are doomed to repeat the sins of the anthracite coal era. God forbid that should happen. So how do we make sure we have the proper oversight? How do we make sure we protect our environment? How do we make sure that our water is clean? We can manufacture a lot of things. We can't manufacture drinking water. We get rid of a 1.5% impact fee, and we make it a 6.5% or even a 7% impact fee. Because then we have the proper oversight by DEP. We have the proper oversight to make sure that our water isn't compromised. We're able to reinvest into our roads and our bridges. We could also invest into a catastrophic fund, God forbid, in case we need it someday. We could also, it also allows us to invest in our schools, in our aging, and in the job creation and job training. So we need to go from 1.5% to at least 6.5% to make sure that we the people are not compromised.
Andre, could I have a rebuttal? And I do agree with Representative Smith on this. We need to increase the rate. But I think, Mr. Smith, that we negotiate that rate. We don't say 6% or 7%. We negotiate with these companies and let the company that is willing to take the highest tax and generate the most revenue be the company we choose.
Well, and I've had conversations with those companies, and they expect to pay. They expect to pay their fair share. But when we have a governor that wants to turn a blind eye, if you will, or a deaf ear to these gas companies, and they have the majority in the House and they have the majority in the Senate, look, we can fight and we can yell and we can scream, but at the end of the day, they're doing the bulk of the dictating, if you will.
Ken, you'll answer the next question first, and I want to stick with the environment. What should state government, or what can you do as a legislator to encourage the use of alternative fuel sources and to bring jobs in this growing industry to our area?
Well, just as I spoke of earlier with job creation, making sure that we have proper job training, but be business friendly and to give incentives to renewable energy, to clean energy, that and the businesses that are going to have our environment foremost, and we do that by being business friendly, by having tax credits, by having incubators like the Ben Franklin Institute. We have an incubator right here in Scranton on Lackawanna Avenue that takes small little entrepreneurs, and it gives them the time and the ability to grow their companies and to grow their idea, and to make sure that on the state level that we have communications with them as well. So when we do a partnership, a public-private partnership, making sure that all are vested and invested into the process to make sure that we have 21st century energy that will protect our environment.
Kevin, the question to you.
Andre, I almost completely agree with Representative Smith in regard to clean energy. The natural gas industry, it didn't just arrive here. 8 years ago at Carnegie Mellon, a 19-year-old students created a project called the Green Bus, where they turned a school bus into a natural gas automobile, not dependent on oil. And if 19-year-olds could do that, why is the state of Pennsylvania not doing that? Why are we continuing to mess up our environment with oil spills and unclean energy? And we have the ability right here in Pennsylvania to use this natural gas. 19-year-olds have done it. How come our government isn't doing it?
Okay, moving on. Kevin, you respond to this question first. Let's move on to education. You've both talked about it a little bit, so let's give you 2 minutes to talk about it. Is the state appropriately funding our school districts, and what action, again, could you, as a legislator, take to improve education in Pennsylvania? Goes to you, Kevin.
Andre, education is not just standards and tests. Education is the entire package. It is going to school. It is going and playing sports at the end of the day. It is being in the band. It is going on French Club. It is the all-around experience. And the cuts to education are so dire right now because our children are not getting that full experience. They're taking tests, and they're meeting these standards, and they're getting funding based on tests. That is not a liberal education that America was built on. Our schools and our children deserve all of these programs and projects. It is not science. It is not just science and math and reading and English. It is working side by side with special education. Public education is a microcosm of the real world, and we need to fund the real world.
Ken, the question to you.
Andrea, for the past 5 years, I've sat on the Education Committee. I'm the subcommittee chairman to special education. I understand the trials that we face. And it's one thing to say that we need to fund it, but how do we fund it? You know, right now the state is not funding at a proper level. We're funding, our schools get a funding at about 36% from the state. We need to be at about 50%. Because remember, our governor cut $900 million last year just to basic ed. He's projecting another $100 million this year, and last year we also had $600 million cut by the federal government. So how do we raise revenue? We raise revenue by making sure that in that 6.5% from Marcellus Shale, that a certain amount of that goes to basic education. Table games. Table games right now, they're taxed at about 16%. Let's raise it 2%. 2% additionally on the table games. That'll generate tens of millions of dollars. And also, for example, with respect to our charter schools, in the past, the state would reimburse the school districts 30%. 30% would come back to the school district with respect to the funding. 30% would come back to the district for the charter schools, all right, and the transportation and what that takes from the school districts. But this governor took that 30%, and there's no reimbursement now of those dollars. So that's an additional 30% taken away from the local school district.
Thank you. Kevin, the same question to you.
And I agree mostly, again, with Representative Smith. The governor cut the DEP, but before he did that, the governor took millions of dollars from big oil. Millions. We're sitting here asking questions about taxing natural gas, 6.5, 7. It's not going to happen. We have a governor who took millions of dollars from big oil and then cut our schools. I'm going to stand up to Governor Tom Corbett. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm in this race. I'm for public education. I'm for our communities. There is no man too powerful when I'm looking at the faces of young children who are getting funding cut that is their future.
Kevin and Ken, I think we have time for one last question before we move into your closing statements. We're on the campus of the University of Scranton, so let's talk briefly about higher education. College students today face large amounts of debt and an entry into a very dull job market. How serious do you think this problem is, and what solutions do you propose for lifting the burden that graduating students face? And Kevin, the first response to you.
You know, when you get loans from college and graduate school, depending where you go to work after that, there's a big difference. You could graduate from Harvard and find a job in Boston, but if you graduate from Harvard and come back to Scranton, you're still repaying the same loan, but you're making half the money. And we're literally crucifying our economy. When people are in their 50s and even early 60s before their graduate school loans are paid off, and then their children are going to college, it means they have no money. It means that they're in debt, and that's why there's not a strong economy. Debt is when you have loans and you pay them back every month until you're out of debt. That is what debt is.
Ken, the question to you.
Higher education. Higher education is critically important to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's going to dictate where Pennsylvania is, how it competes in a global economy. Mr. Haggerty just spoke about kids coming out with debt. There's no question that they are, and it's unacceptable. I mean, kids are coming out of school today. They have a mortgage before they have a mortgage, and here in Pennsylvania, we have very good state schools with respect to higher education. And when you look at Pennsylvania, the raw tuition is higher, but there's more grants available in Pennsylvania. We have to make sure that the FIA grants are available to our students, number one. We have to make sure that that's properly funded and properly run. Also, I spoke about Jumpstart Pennsylvania, encouraging companies to hire students coming right out of college, a $4,000 tax credit for our students coming out of school, and they're the best and they're the brightest, and certainly there's an example of our business and our higher institutions of higher education coming together to employ our students, our young students, and to make sure that they don't have to look to go to New York or New Jersey or West Virginia. They could stay right here in Pennsylvania. That's what we want. We want to keep our students, our best and our brightest, right here in Pennsylvania.
Andre, could I have a quick rebuttal?
Okay.
Representative Smith's household income is 3 times greater than the average family living in Scranton, Pennsylvania, 3 times. And these young men and women and their families are paying back all of their loans. They're paying them back. Mr. Smith had the opportunity to restructure loans to make small payments, and he refused to do that. And these young men and women are living with their parents, working 2 and 3 jobs to repay their debts. And I find it hard to sit here and let you be the spokesperson for these young men and women when you are making 3 times the household income and refuse to accept accountability.
Ken, do you have a rebuttal?
Kevin, you're an angry young man, and I don't know what that's all about. But look, you know, once again, my obligation is a process that if I could wave a magic wand and make this process end, I certainly would, because I know that I want to get this behind me. I'm sorry I had a small business that went bad and in a bad economy once again, but it's a process that it didn't happen overnight. It's not going to be solved overnight, but I could tell you, I don't walk away from my obligations. And at the end of the day, I will have debt the rest of my life. That's the facts. And you know what? When you have a small business, and anyone that owns a small business, I'm sure they could understand. They will understand what I'm talking about.
Mr. Smith, are you filing for bankruptcy? Are you filing for bankruptcy?
No.
Mr. Haggerty.
You're not filing for bankruptcy?
No.
That concludes the question and answer period for the debate this evening. You each have 2 minutes for a closing statement. We drew straws in the beginning before we started this evening. And Kevin, you drew the straw we drew your name for the first closing statement. You have 2 minutes.
Andre, again, I want to thank you personally for hosting this debate. This is the only debate that we have. We have no other way of reaching out to the audiences of the 112th District, and they're out there. And they can't be here tonight. A lot of them are sick and handicapped and elderly. And they're wondering why they're doing their fair share for their community. They're wondering why when tax day comes and they're getting their Social Security check and they're not paying for medicine so that they can meet their commitments to this community and pay their bills, they're wondering why, and they've asked me to ask these questions tonight. Mr. Smith, I'm not angry, I'm disappointed. Lots of the people of the 112th District are disappointed in your behavior. For 5.5 years, since the day you took office, you have been lying on the ethics statement. You have been hiding loans. You are calling it debt, and it's not debt. Debt is when you take a loan and you pay it down after years and years and years, and then you are finished. There is missing money, Mr. Smith, and you keep smiling about it, but you cannot detail where that money is. And if it was used for your business, then why were your employees not paid unemployment? Why were they not paid Social Security, the basic protections? They gave you their money and you kept it. Why did you have a state loan that you stopped paying on? Did you use the $138,000 to pay that off? You did not. You didn't pay the employees' remaining checks. You didn't use that money for your business. Lots of people loved your business, including my grandmother and my family who went there. This is about our government and the abuses you've taken on since the very day you've taken office.
And you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
That's your closing statement? That your closing statement is to just attack me? This is supposed to be a debate, and you're right, it was supposed to be about government. You didn't talk about government tonight. You didn't talk about government tonight because you don't have the answers, and there's the problem. And that comes back to my seniority. I have the seniority. I understand the process. I understand how to get things done. When people come to me with a problem in their life, I know where to go to get the answer. I also, you know, look, my entire life, all I've ever done is get up early and work hard, and that's what I continue to do. Look at the committees that I sit on. Education, Subcommittee Chairman. Health and Human Services. Aging, Subcommittee Chairman on Aging and Health. Look at those committees. That's who I am. I am about the people, and I am concerned about all the trials that they face today. These are tough economic times. Nobody knows it more than I. Nobody knows it more than I. When we talk about it, I not only see it, but I feel it, and I feel it every single day. But I can assure you that I go to work every single day with being your voice in Harrisburg, taking your concerns to Harrisburg, and then coming home and making sure that I do represent you. And let me just say this in a humble way. I am just a guy that works hard, that understands the struggles, small business owner. You know, sometimes bad things happen to good people, and it did, and I'm sorry. But I don't walk away from my commitments. I want to continue to be your representative. I want to use my seniority to be a strong voice in Harrisburg, and I humbly ask for your vote.
That concludes our debate this evening. Let's give a round of applause for both of our candidates. Thank you so much. I want to thank them both for their commitment to democracy, both for serving as a representative and for throwing their hat in the ring. It takes a lot to run for public office, and we do appreciate that. Again, you can see this online at lwvlackawanna.org. It'll be posted later this week and also on ECTV. And again, if you'd like to join the League of Women Voters, please pick up one of our membership brochures that's out in the lobby, or you can, again, visit us online at lwvlackawanna.org. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.